Welcome to Facing the Moment, brought to you by the Foundation for Self-Leadership. In these episodes, we will address various crises and focus on how to navigate them with abundant fortitude and a bit of hope. As we discuss relevant observations together, we will identify meaningful actions that will generate valuable insights. You can download all episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube.
I welcome our listeners to this new episode of our podcast. Today we'll be discussing repairing broken dialogues. Just a quick scan around us, folks, locally, within the U.S. and globally, reveals to us, among many, one serious concern. Individuals and groups appear stuck in their corners, holding rigidly to their beliefs and to their firm interpretation of what they consider to be the truth, of which they seem certain, and unwilling to engage in meaningful two-way dialogues as a result. The old adage, if you're not with me, you're against me, seems to ring true today. Wholesale. We talk across each other, we talk against each other. The chasm among groups and communities is sadly widening. Dialogues among us are broken along so many dimensions. And this breakdown gives rise to stalemates, violent solutions that we know aren't solutions, and threats on the humanistic fabric we all desire to protect. How do we repair these broken dialogues? Where do we start? To attempt to answer these complex questions, I'm very pleased to be joined today by Jen Wofford, MSW. Jen, welcome.
Thank you so much. It is an honor to speak with you.
Thank you. Jen is a seasoned community organizer and activist, a highly trained social worker and therapist who has accumulated knowledge and skills in many models of thought and behavior, from nonviolent communication to internal family systems. Jen has recently founded the Center for Grounded Action, a nonprofit dedicated to helping train individuals and groups to cultivate resilience and support them along the process. Thank you so very much for joining me, Jen. What else would you like to add about you? Things that might be relevant to our conversation today.
Oh, you've nailed it. I did organizing and campaigns for 17 years and then shifted and became a therapist and social worker and consultant. And so I'm glad to be here with you. And I think you're framing this very worrisome, urgent conversation. How do we repair broken dialogues? And people are becoming more polarized and divided and less connected.
Yes, ain't that the truth? So let's start at the top.
Yeah.
As I said in the opening, wherever I look these days, I really see broken dialogues across so many spaces: political, economic, religious, social. Polarizations and divisions across society appear to be contributing to the breakdown of dialogue. This is what I see. What is it you see?
Yes, I definitely see that. I see very much. I think particularly, I'll go into technology for a moment. I think particularly on listservs, community listservs, professional listservs, that is one of the places where people have experienced reactivity, and people sort of criticize each other a bit more bluntly. And what we're missing through technology is we're missing the human connection. We can try to remember that the other person on the end of an email, is a full person with ups and downs, with family, with struggle. Every human being has struggle. We can try to keep that present in our mind and not just react to the words that we're seeing. But there's been a lot of reactivity that I know of really wonderful therapists in other areas who've experienced painful experiences on listservs, and people, neighborhoods where there's been very tight, tense. So I think one of the problems, is that we have become less connected as people. We have lost a lot of our communal spaces. So even before COVID, but especially during the pandemic and after, we have lost communal spaces. Many fewer people are at workplaces. where there's the water cooler conversation, the informal, how was your weekend? How was your weekend? What are you working on? We've lost a lot of that. And I'm not the first to say this. There's a book by Robert Putnam. Bob Putnam wrote a book called Bowling Alone, that America used to be full of bowling leagues, for example. That's just one example, but Bowling Alone. And then Sherry Turkle, who's an MIT social science professor, has written several books on technology. Her first was The Second Self, about the internet, how people could have this wonderful second self that they could explore in the internet. This was the dawning of the internet. But then, as she researched what was actually happening, she's written a few other books. And another recent one is called Alone Together. And she found that people are relating to each other through screens, and we are feeling more and more alone. We are feeling more disconnected. Yeah. And she described, lawyers in, law firm partners in a law firm used to walk down the hallway and say, hey, Bob, hey, Jose, how's the latest brief going? And they'd say, oh, yeah, well, I was working on this and that. And they'd get into an informal conversation. And through those informal conversations, new ideas and creativity would be sparked. It is through the water cooler, informal, unplanned conversation that dialogue happens and new ideas and creativity get sparked. And instead, they send a email, hey, Bob, hey, Jose, how's the brief coming? Fine, it's done Monday, or I turned it in, done. And the dialogue is over. It's just, it's informative, it's factual, and we've lost the context of the human interaction and connection. And, you and I are both parents, and there's also sad parts of her book where she talks about, kids coming up to the mom or dad's car at pickup time, and the mom's face is down studying her screen. So there's the missed moment of eye contact. How was your day, honey? There's the missed connection. So I think screens are a big part of the problem. We know from the Surgeon General report that we are the most. We are the loneliest. We have an epidemic of loneliness. People feel very lonely. We're the loneliest generation and the most anxious. And if you look at youth, you and I both care about young people in America, and the youth are feeling highly anxious and very lonely.
We dedicated an episode to that situation with youth, and we're recording one soon on loneliness in particular. And you're right, ever since the advent of emails, we don't see the other person as a 3D human being with emotions and issues and certain experiences with that we share or that we have challenges with. And we do not know via email how to negotiate these differences or these conflicts. And it's easy to be, stern, or to be curt, or to be dismissive, or even to be cruel in an email.
Yeah. Versus people give themselves permission to be a bit.
Right. And as a result, perhaps, that's only one factor, technology.
Yeah.
The political pressure and the economic pressure and the issues among groups and religions and nations have taken us to a whole new space these days, which is, contributing and being caused by broken dialogue. So I know from previous conversations we've had that you have engaged in efforts to address the broken dialogue. Might you share a few thoughts in the beginning? Maybe just give me a sense of what it is you've been doing at a high level. We'll get a better opportunity to discuss details later on, but just to give the listeners a sense of how you've come to help address this issue of broken dialogue.
Thank you. I think one of the things is, it dawned on me about 4 years ago, after being in the field of psychotherapy for 20 years, 22 years, 23 years, that we could take complex theories and boil it down to very learnable, actionable, practical skills that people could use and have. And so I did that work and have 2 steps for how we manage internally when someone says something that's alarming to us, when someone does or says something that's upsetting, when world events are quite upsetting. 2 steps to how we manage internally, how we soothe our nervous system, how we regulate, and 2 steps for how we dialogue across difference, how we talk to somebody with whom we disagree. And I put those together in a model called Grounded Resilience. and resilience training. So one space we did it in was around Israel-Palestine. And I'll just say that right after October 7th, immediately after October 7th, I saw, like we all did, I saw incredible polarization and division erupting on neighborhood listservs, in neighborhoods, on campuses. You're either with me or you're against me, very much that message. And people felt they had to choose. You had to stand with Israel or stand for Palestinians. And it was a very explosive moment. And so one thing I did was immediately say, oh, no, we need to come together. We need to come together and be together in the same space and value all human life as sacred, that we do not have to agree in order to come together. We don't have to agree in order to value all human life as sacred. And I put together events at a series of public libraries, a series of events, and invited widely and heavily, and spent a lot of time reassuring people who are Muslim, reassuring people who are Jewish that they could come together, that they would be safe, that yes, in fact, we can do this. We can come together and value human life as sacred. And we did it. And it was beautifully, deeply, meaningfully well received. So that's an example of how important it is to come together.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
And we don't have to agree.
Yeah. And thank you for doing this very important, complex work, Jen. It's wonderful for you to have stepped into the arena and brought your skills to bear for this work. And you're making an assumption, and I think it's a helpful assumption, and I like that assumption because I make it often, that broken dialogues can be repaired.
Yes.
That people can step up and relate to each other, or not, across lines of difference, and yet agree to disagree, without, quote unquote, as the adage go, being disagreeable.
Absolutely.
Yes. But are there situations, I want to push you on that a little bit because I'm curious. Are there situations when there are sadly, no opportunity or no possibility, let's say, to repair a dialogue? I'm thinking of one when both sides in a dialogue are not using or accepting common facts or common logic. They have their own perspective that they have developed over the years for whatever reason. It is their certainty and nothing will shake it. And for them to be in a dialogue, they need to at least store that to the side for a moment and listen to the other person without talking to themselves as the other person is speaking. So anyway, the question is, do you believe that every dialogue is repairable? Or are there situations where we need to step away from that belief?
I think every relationship can be repairable if there's a willingness and a desire, and there isn't always desire or willingness. I think when you say people have a common set of facts, I would agree, but I think that in general, people have a different experience of the same set of facts, and they make a different conclusion. And there's often a different set of meaning making, of interpretation and meaning making. What does that mean to me? And I think that often is the root of where we go south with each other, what the meaning is that we take from an event. There's hundreds of examples of that. And people then, become more angered and upset because of the meaning they are making of a set of events that occurred. So we may witness the same set of events, but have a very different interpretation of those. But yes, I think that relationships can be repaired. I do believe, along with Marshall Rosenberg, who developed nonviolent communication, that conflict is inevitable. We cannot want the exact same thing at the exact same time. We cannot need the exact same thing at the exact same time. There will be conflicts, but can we handle them with deep respect and nonviolently, where we honor that you are having a need and I am having a need, and they are not the same at the same time. And that can be acceptable. That there's nothing wrong with you for needing what you need. There's nothing wrong with you for wanting what you want. And there's nothing wrong with me for wanting what I want. And they can be different, and we can handle that with respect.
Yeah. So we'll get there. I'll ask you a little later to share more about that model. But on the same topic of the opportunity, the possibility of repairing dialogue, it seems to me that each party to the dialogue needs to be willing
Yes.
to repair it, right? I mean,
There has
as
to
a
be
therapist, you probably know if your client isn't willing to take a path of healing with all its obstacles and challenges and promises, that client, it doesn't matter how brilliant as a therapist you are, it's not going to work for that client. They need to be willing and try to come to it in good faith and say, yes, I am willing to engage in a dialogue. I'm willing to repair it. And for me to do that, here are the things I need to do. And here may be where my line in the sand is. How do you react to what I'm saying?
Yes, exactly. And I think that also people can enter. I want to encourage this. People can enter and should try to be okay with the fact that everything won't be perfect and won't be guaranteed in advance. I think we've gotten a little bit, and the younger generations have gotten a little bit overly focused on, is everything going to feel safe to me at all moments? Probably not. But can I still step forward? Absolutely, yes. So even that example I gave earlier of bringing people together across the Israel-Palestine tension and divide, they were not thrilled about walking into a room where people they thought of as their enemy, would also be there. And I spent a lot of time reassuring safety, and I arranged for undercover police officers to be on site inside to make sure it was safe, but also just reassurance that actually we can do this. And people are nervous and uncomfortable as they walk in, but then, little by little, an effort at dialogue, a little bit of connection, a little bit of you're a human being. There's this wonderful program that you know of, Braver Angels, and Monica Guzman. Moni was, I got a chance to speak with her, and she was talking about their work. They often they do it across the blue-red divide, across Democrat-Republican, Republican-Democrat divide. And they make sure there's an equal number of people on either quote unquote side at each meeting that they hold. And what they do is they have people connect as human beings. How many people have
So this is how you create safety? Because I'm curious, when you said safety, we all need that physical safety, psychological safety, emotional safety. We want to believe that, nobody's judging me as a participant. They might be judging my ideas, but how do you establish that? Give me an idea of what you do first when you have people stuck, willing to sit in the same space. How do you help establish that climate of safety?
So then I'll go a little more deeply into what we do. So we would first, like for example, around that topic, Israel-Palestine, we would first say, we're going to talk about before we open the dialogue, before you introduce yourself, before you say why you're there, because we can already lose the room if we open it and people say why they're there, right? I'm Jen Wofford, and I'm the only one who cares about Palestinian rights. We have lost the room. I'm Jen Wofford. I'm the only one who cares about Israel. We have lost the room. So before they can introduce themselves, we say, we're going to first do skill building. We do some grounding, some somatic body practices, feeling their body in the chair. And we teach 2 steps for how to manage internally, how to soothe our own nervous system, how to soothe our own reactivity. And I say, you may likely have a moment when someone says something that is alarming to you or upsetting to you. That may likely happen. I can't guarantee that won't happen. That may likely happen. When that happens, here's what you'll do, right? And we do a little bit of somatic practices with our body and orienting to the room, looking around the room, grounding, and a little bit of talking to our own parts inside. I have a part that can feel defensive. I have a part that can feel reactive. I have a part that feels angry. I have a part that feels scared. And we teach them how to work inside with the different parts so that they can stay in the dialogue.
And I think, when you talk about parts, these are aspects of us. I guess I could see your training in IFS showing up here. It's these various stories and voices and sensation that we experience. So thank you.
And what I often say to people on that is, if anyone saw the movie Inside Out, the Pixar film Inside Out, or Inside Out 2, and almost everyone has heard of it, where each, there was an angry part and there was a sad part, right? And that's what the movie's all about, is that each of these parts sometimes take over. And the purpose of the first movie was when she finally was willing to sit with the sad part and just hear it out, then it could relax and not take over.
That's, I guess, one of the innovations of this model, right? The IFS model. It kind of talked about these various aspects, and it suggests that we have, within us, this source of wisdom that can allow these parts to connect and work together with greater compassion and curiosity and so on.
Yes, we have a self energy, and the self, we each have it, the wisdom in us. And we can actually soothe our own parts, our reactive parts, our sad parts, our worried parts, our angry parts. We can do that. So I teach them that. And then I teach them a little nonviolent communication method, how to speak without judging a group of people or another person in the room. Can you speak without judging? Can you speak of your feelings and your needs? So I'm feeling and I'm needing rather than you are, blah, blah, blah. And I teach them a little mirroring, a little imago mirroring. So how to listen to someone with a different part of your brain. So when all the time in every conversation, we're thinking of what we want to say next. If you're doing mirroring, you're actually tracking what someone is saying, not your opinion of it, not spinning it, not your analysis, not your response, just tracking them and then letting them know how they make sense to you and a little empathy for how they're feeling. So I teach them those, and then we open the dialogue, and then people can do it.
That's great. I think this is very helpful, this grounding and giving them these early skills, even though some of them require some, practice and discipline, especially clearing our mind when I'm listening to you. So I'm not listening to me while you're talking and I miss everything you say. So I appreciate that. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk more about these specific models. I'd like to jump to the outcome a little bit you mentioned grounded resilience in your work at the center. And this is where you'd like to take people, you'd like to facilitate the development of grounded resilience. I'd like to know what it looks like, what it feels like to the person involved and to the person watching or attempting to engage. Share a few words about what grounded resilience really is in your interpretation.
Sure. And may I do two things with it? One is give you an example out of the dialogues in Israel-Palestine, and then second, talk about the recent trainings we're doing in resilience. So with those dialogues, we never once had a blow up. And I didn't realize how remarkable that was until I was talking to a friend on the West Coast in California who said that he had just left an effort at dialogue in the Bay Area that went south. It was horrible. And that's when he said, "What are you doing?" And I described, he said, "You need to write that down." So that was how we started to write it down. So we haven't had a blow up. We had a beautiful, in one dialogue at a major teaching hospital, the big teaching hospital in Boston, with faculty, staff, and students, not with patients, with doctors, nurses, faculty, staff, students. We had a dialogue, and one person just held back until the third round. And I couldn't tell if the person were Jewish or Muslim, Israeli or Palestinian or Arab. I couldn't tell. They were dark-haired, olive skin. I couldn't tell. And they waited until the very end to speak. And then they did speak, and it was beautiful. And another person was able to say to someone who had a Palestinian grandmother and had told a story about her grandmother in Palestine. And the person who was Jewish said, I think a doctor said, see the situation differently. The story of your grandmother will always stay in my heart. It was beautiful. It was very touching. The whole room felt it. The whole room felt touched by that. So I think it's through connection, through feeling connected. That's what I was saying about Braver Angels work. They start with, who has a brother? Step into the center of the room. You have a brother. So we're just connecting as people when they do their work. The other example I want to say, we just did 2 months worth, and 7 free resilience workshops for federal workers who've lost jobs. And the reason we did that is we couldn't figure out, being the small people we are, how to fix the massive problems, right? And I can't get medicine and food to people in Africa and Asia and South America. But we could help the people who were doing good work, who had their lives upended and lost jobs. And so we did a ton of free resilience workshops, 3 online, 4 in person. I recommend in person, but the very first one in March with USAID workers, they convinced me to do it online because so many of their colleagues were stuck overseas, stuck in limbo. And so we did 3 online, 4 in person. And there, what I would say is it's human, it's normal, a normal human reaction in the face of a crisis, in the face of an onslaught of something coming at you, right? So something comes at you. It literally, I'm putting my hand towards my body, like something enters your nervous system, it comes at you. You lose your job, a bomb goes off in the neighborhood, something shocks you. And normal human reaction is sometimes we go into that fight or flight and we go contracted and constricted and edgy and reactive and tight. And we're more likely to yell at our kids or our spouse, or we're more likely to, jump, and we're tense and we're anxious. We wake up in the middle of the night. I had folks in the free resilience workshops who described waking up constantly in the middle of the night in anxiety, like I've lost my job. What the heck am I going to do?
Like a PTSD response.
Yeah, fight or flight, PTSD. So that's the arousal is over tight. It's, too tightly wound. The other response that we tend to have as human beings is we go flat. We get lethargic, depressed. We can't get off the couch. We can't function. There's no way we can even send an email. We just go flat and frozen. And so resilience is in between. Resilience is in the middle. Resilience is where we are neither in a contracted, constricted, tightly wound, reactive state, nor are we flat, depressed, unable to get off the couch state. We're able to meet the challenge and continue to take a step forward, even in uncertainty.
And say more, because I do not want us to be defining resilience by what it's not. I'd like us to define resilience by what it is. What is it we're trying to achieve?
Yeah, what did you hear me say?
Say more about that state that you're referring to, being able to step up, being able to persevere, being able to get up once again, being able to, maintain hope, being able to cry in the middle of it, because I'm sad and frustrated, but knowing that, there is a way, and I might not control how to get there. I might be hurt before I get there.
Yes.
Say more from your perspective as a practitioner, as someone who's designed and implemented these workshops. What does it look like to be personally resilient? And then the corollary to that, Jen, I want you to blow it up and tell me, ideally, dream with me, what does collective resilience look like?
Let's
start with the personal first and take me there.
Okay, so personal resilience, we are able to meet the moment and continue to step forward. And just as you said, we are able to cry when we're sad. So we're not sweeping our feelings under the rug. We're not denying them, and we're not powering through. Like, I just got to power through, right? So you and I would call that a manager part from internal family systems language. A manager part is just going to power right through. We're instead able to meet it, take a step forward, be able to exist within uncertainty, and feel at peace, feel a sense of calm and feel at peace, even though there will be many times that we get tense and anxious, or we get depressed and sad, but we rebound. We come back to, okay, yesterday I couldn't even figure out how to get off the couch. I was so depressed about losing my house. But today I'm going to send some emails. I'm going to meet with a job coach. I'm going to consider moving, whatever. Maybe yesterday or maybe in the middle of the night, I woke up in a panic, but then I was able to talk to myself, and I talked to the panicky part, and I helped it understand that I was there for it. And it started to calm down a little.
So who's the I in this case? When you say
the self-energy inside, the self-energy. So I'll give you an example.
Yes,
so from the workshop, one of the very first workshops, free resilience workshops for federal workers, a woman who worked at USAID volunteered. And I always check it out 3 times. I think that's important. Are you sure you want to, do you want to do this? Are you sure? Yep, 3 times. Yeah. Okay. So she wanted to do this practice. So we did some of that work with her parts inside, and she had an anxious part that was waking her up at 2 or 3 in the morning, panicked, and was overwhelming her. And so little by little, using the model that you and I know called internal family systems, little by little, helping her let it know that she got it. I pretend my name is, Julia. Julia, hear that anxious part, that it's really overwhelmed, and little by little asking it to tell us what's troubling it, why is it waking me up at 2 and 3 in the morning? What is it wanting me to know? What's it wanting me to do? And then letting it know, I get that. I hear that. And then little by little, helping it unblend, we say, helping it not overwhelm the whole nervous system, and getting to know it. And then eventually befriending it, just sitting with it, letting it know you are there for it. And what happens is parts calm down. Angry parts, anxious parts, sad parts, they calm down when they feel
it sounds a little strange, and I'm saying that knowing the model, but to an outsider, it sounds like I'm talking to a part of me. But what you're saying is that there are all these voices inside my head, and sometimes one of the voices takes over. Takes over for maybe a good reason, but it takes over, and the outcome of its taking over doesn't feel good, right? And what you're saying to me is that there is a way for me to remember that this is not all of me. This voice doesn't represent the core of who I am. It's just an aspect of me that's responding to the moment or reacting to the moment in ways that may not be desirable. But there's an I inside of me, right? Like there's an I, and I'm surrounded by various me's, is how I like to call them. That I is able to separate and look at the me's almost from a different vantage point, with compassion and understanding, the way we talk to a child of ours lovingly. And that creates that space, and maybe a new perspective sets in, and a new type of physical energy sets in that it can get out of the couch.
And a little more spaciousness. The person felt much more spaciousness inside, and the anxious part calmed down a lot. Doesn't have to go away. It just calmed a lot. Felt like she was listening. It felt like she was understanding it, and she felt more spacious inside. It was beautiful and remarkable. And so let me give you, let me answer your other big question, which is, what would it be like if entire communities had the ability to calm our own selves and to regulate our own selves and to be more resilient, so that even if you said something that upset me, I'm not destroyed or distraught by it. If I see something on a listserv, I'm not going to jump on it. Maybe I'm going to try to respond with compassion. By the way, that's what I did around the Israel-Palestine, is I chose to interpret every attack as fear. People are afraid. And I responded, I understand this is very delicate and scary, and let me reassure you. But they didn't lead off with, I'm feeling nervous. They led off with, you're a crazy nut. They attacked me. Fine, from both sides. People on the left demanded I had to make a statement about Palestine on every flyer. And I said, I'm not going to do that, because I'm not going to make other people not come. This is a space for all. We don't have to agree. It's a welcome space. All are welcome. And then people more on the right were saying, this is nuts, you're crazy. So I just responded to each person, understanding that they were afraid underneath it. So I chose to interpret it as fear. So let me talk about for a second, and this will be a stretch. I think that in Israel and in Palestine, that both the current Israeli government led by Netanyahu and Hamas, led by the leaders of Hamas, are operating as if there's only one way to address their needs, right? So if I am the Israeli government, I would handle it differently. But at the moment, what I see is that Netanyahu, and yes, I'm sure there is political reasons for his own benefit that he's operating the way he's operating. But if I just see it as, my job is to keep the Israeli people safe. That's my job as a government. I only know one way to keep my people safe, and that's to attack and destroy the other people. That's a limited one option. With resilience, you have far more options. You're not limited to just one way to manage it. And Hamas has decided there's one way to try to bring freedom and liberation to Palestinian people, and that's through horrible, violent massacre.
That's the certainty that I was referring to earlier, that people party to a conflict, to a broken dialogue, assume, not just assume, they believe, from the deepest element of their being, that what they know is the only way.
The only way.
That's their certainty, which takes them down further into a greater conflict. And what you just shared, Jen, is easily extrapolated to what's going on in the US today, to what's going on in many parts of the world, whether militarily, whether, economically, whether attacks on certain identities of people or choices that people make, or attacks on journalism, right? They're all beliefs that have been planted deep in the earth. And we build everything around that foundation. So I like very much what you said about resilience gives us many options.
Yes.
Because what you're saying is we become more creative.
Yes.
Right? When we are willing to find a solution that is mutually acceptable.
Yes.
And that's what bridges the broken dialogue. The mutuality of the engagement.
Yes.
Instead of a win-lose, which ends up being lose-lose. Every win-lose effort, in my humble read of history, has taken us to a lose-lose situation. Only an attempt to get to a win-win, takes us to yes, allows us to find a solution.
Yes, and
I like that very much.
I love what you said. I love what you said. And what if we took out the word win? Because then we're already into a power struggle. What if instead we talked about just getting our core basic needs met? Right?
I like that even better. Yes.
Your core basic needs and my core basic needs are not going to be the same at the same time. But how do we make sure that your people, their core basic needs are met and my people's core basic needs are met? Then we're in a dialogue of creativity, and how do we make sure that happens so that all people have basic human needs, as opposed to I'm going to win over you. As soon as we get into that proposition of over or one.
So talk to me, if you don't mind, about these needs, because it sounds like nonviolent communication language and model. Share with us a bit more specific how you take this NVC approach and use it. I know you said clearly in the beginning you've integrated a number of approaches, the inside-facing approach and the outside-facing approach.
Yes.
Please share with us in a few words how each approach fits into your effort to help facilitate building resilience.
Sure. Well, this is one that everybody can do. I have yet to see any room where people couldn't do this instantaneously, which is the first thing I ask them is, what are your core human needs, universal human needs? And they come up with it, food, shelter, water, safety, connection, love, purpose, meaning, community. They come up with it. And it doesn't have to be the exact same words, but they all come up with it. They come up with the core human needs. These are universal human needs, right? If I were born in Papua New Guinea, if I were born in Ontario, Canada, if I were born somewhere else, universal human needs. We need food, shelter, water, safety. We need connection. We need love and community. And we need a sense of purpose or meaning, something we're doing in the world. And then I ask the room, I just did this with the federal workers who lost jobs. I asked, okay, so how do you feel when your needs are met? When your core needs are met, how do you feel? How do you feel, Tawfiq, when your core needs are met?
I feel fulfilled. I feel that, I'm content.
Content.
I feel blessed.
Blessed.
If that were to happen. Maybe that's the meaning of bliss. When someone's needs are met. And that to me includes my family's needs, right? So to me, I kind of broaden that.
Yeah.
I know we have to differentiate, but to me, when you have responsibility, for and toward others, I can count them into that tight circle. And when their needs are met, I feel was content.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Yeah, and exactly. People feel blessed, content, calm, happy, elated, relaxed, grateful, more generous, at ease, right? So when your needs are met, you have one set of feelings: content, happy, joyful, creative, playful, calm, peaceful. When your needs are not met, how do you feel? When your needs for love or connection are not met, when your needs for purpose and meaning are not met, when your needs for community and recognition are not met, when your needs for sustenance and income are not met, how do you feel?
Yeah, well, we feel agitated,
Agitated,
dysregulated. Maybe some people might feel anxious, or even depressed, might feel angry, right? To be able to force these needs to be met. But we feel it, like you said earlier about the body. We feel it in our gut, in our neck, in our shoulders.
And everybody's able to do that. And they come up with it instantly. We basically, human beings, when our core needs are not met, we might feel mad, angry, frustrated. We might feel sad, bad, lonely, depressed. We might feel dejected, isolated. We might feel anxious, worried, fearful, stressed. So, you ask people, and then you say, and these are people who had their core needs taken away: your need for purpose, your need to be recognized, your need for meaningful work gone. How do you feel? Angry, frustrated, fearful, scared, panicked, all sorts of things, right? And when your core need for income, your need for food, for shelter has been threatened, how do you feel? Well, they know how they feel, and everyone can do it. So I start there. And people can get that instantaneously, that we as human beings have core, all beings, animals.
So now, how do we relate to each other when I have a need in this relationship and it's not being met? Sometimes the needs cannot be met in the moment, because in the case of the sad situation of federal workers, there was an attack on their jobs for whatever reason. Right. And now the only way that need is met is to have another job that might be just as meaningful, or as well compensating, or whatever it is. So in the moment, these needs may not be met. So there are two things that come up here for me. One is, what do I do when you cannot meet my need and I cannot have it met in the moment? So I have to sit with it unmet for a while. And two, maybe you have the answer to meeting my needs and you're not meeting it. And what can I do so that you can be aware of that? So yeah. Could you address one or both of these situations?
Yeah. So it's empathy for self and empathy for other. So empathy for myself, empathy for your own needs. Don't sweep them under the rug. Empathy for your own feelings. Don't sweep them under the rug. And empathy for the other person. So let's say, let me just try to go with just one of the examples, because that'll be easier for me.
Yeah.
So if you have needs, let's say that we were in a relationship and you had needs that were different from my needs on a particular day, that's going to happen. I would have empathy for your needs. I wouldn't need to judge you as being wrong or bad for wanting something that I don't want. I don't need to condemn you for having needs that are not ones I want to meet at the moment, or that I even agree with. Instead, I'm going to have empathy for your needs and empathy for my needs. Empathy that I'm not in a place where I'm able or willing to meet the needs that you're expressing. And I have empathy for myself and empathy for you. So I call it empathy for self, empathy for other. And I think it's core. The way we communicate, if we use nonviolent communication method, is with I feel and I need, rather than you are this or that. So instead of
responsibility, right? We own it instead of blaming the other.
Yeah,
we take responsibility for what we feel and how our needs are not being met.
Yeah, and we express it. I'm feeling a certain way because I'm needing something, and you would have, ideally, if we were communicating, you would have empathy that I really get it. I get that you're feeling this way and that you're needing that. I really hear that and I get it. And I'm not able to meet that need right now. It doesn't mean I don't value you, but I'm not able to do that for you right now. So then empathy for you and empathy for me, that empathy for both sides. Yeah. And I do that
Yeah.
with couples all the time.
Very well. So listen, you said something that bears repeating and stressing over: the non-judging,
Yeah.
the non-judging, that
Yeah.
I am not gonna judge you
Right.
for your needs, for your beliefs. Often conflicts happen because we need our dignity to be honored.
Yeah.
We need to be heard. And often people judge us, and we feel that, we feel attacked. We feel that our dignity is being directly attacked. So
Yeah.
I like that notion of non-judgment.
Yeah.
And it probably is a practice that we can remind ourselves on, that if I have an issue with Jen, I'm not going to judge Jen. I'm not going to call Jen names or say she is this or she is that. I'm going to say Jen has these beliefs, and I want to try to replace that with, maybe, might I be curious about why Jen has these beliefs?
And in nonviolent communication method, in Marshall Rosenberg's work, the act of judging another person is the root of violence. The act of judging a group of people is the root of violence. When I am in the act of judging, evaluating, assessing you or a group of people, I am no longer in relationship or connection. It's what leads to violence. If I think that I can assess and evaluate you rather than hear you and relate to you, I'm no longer in connection. I'm in a state of judgment, which leads to violence. So
I can see that.
So judgment is a big deal in that model.
Yeah.
And I think it's accurate.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, who am I to judge a person? I mean, I might judge a behavior, right? I mean, not everything goes, but I cannot see myself to judge a person, because that person has certain experiences, certain events that happen in their life. I never understand why they got to where they got. I don't understand their generational, cultural issues that they're facing.
Sure.
There's a lot goes on, and this is where, our shared humanity shows up. So
Yeah.
I want to go personal with you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'd love to hear from you about a time in your own life when dialogue might have broken down. And
sure.
you
And I
did
think
not know how to repair it, or you might have stepped up and repaired the rupture.
And I think what's important there is that it is actually okay to not always be able to resolve everything, but to still accept people. I worry a little bit that we're now in cancel culture, and if I don't like what you say, I'm just not going to talk to you. And I give this example. When I was in college, I'm a liberal and a progressive. When I was in college, Justice Antonin Scalia, who was a right-wing Supreme Court justice, came to speak at my college. And I stood up and I went to the microphone and I raised my hand and was called on, and I went and I tried to debate him. I tried really hard, and I did a pretty good job, but he's brilliant, but I tried. And people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. I'm like, well, he's here and we're here to discuss ideas and we're here to be challenged. And I'm trying to challenge him and he's challenging me. And that's the purpose of college. These days, probably students would have protested and canceled him. And I think that's a mistake. So there's a fear that, and I said this earlier, I think I want to assure people that efforts at safety will always be made in any of my events, but I cannot guarantee that every moment will feel safe to them.
Mm-hmm.
So efforts at safety will be made. I cannot guarantee that they will not feel unsafe at moments. Obviously, there'll be no violence. I'll make sure of that. But, there's a sense of like, I've got to always feel safe at every possible moment. And I think that we lose growth and at the edge of growing.
Yes.
So I have a brother who does not share my political views, who is much more right-wing. And, what we do is we still are a family. So we still have family events. And, he's still my son's uncle. So I don't think we need to cut off the relationship because we're not going to see it the same way. And I think it is absolutely okay to relate to each other as people with humanity and with courtesy and respect, even when we disagree. So we don't have to resolve everything. He's not going to see the current administration the way I see the current administration. And so I don't need to talk to him about that. He's still my son's uncle. He's still my brother. The other example I would use is, and my siblings have responded differently to it, but my father had a really bad temper. That's what they called it in the 1970s and 80s. But he had violent, aggressive tendencies frequently. And he also was capable of being warm and supportive and fatherly and encouraging. He was complicated, right? He was capable of both.
Well, aren't we all? I mean, isn't what you were sharing earlier, that we have this multiplicity that lives with us, and we can sometimes the most violent or people with the most violent behavior, can love and can show compassion. It's very interesting in that in your case, you're able to stay away, let's say, from difficult conversations. And a lot of people do that, actually. That's their solution. I'm more interested
I tend to step into difficult conversations.
So I want to talk about
I tend to step forward and face what's hard and try to engage.
Well, I want to talk about this because that's
I also think it's okay to say, we don't have to agree, but we can still gather for Thanksgiving.
It's not just agreeing. I think I want to take it one step further, because that's what I'm hearing you say, and that's what I want to encourage our listeners and all of us to think about and maybe emulate. That one, the goal is not, to achieve agreement, perhaps, but to stay in the conversation. Exactly, yes. Like you said, you are
yes.
with your brother. Many families are stopping the dialogue completely around
yes.
difficult issues, which may be good at times. But the other point that I think is more severe or concerning to me is that we enter a dialogue with the desire to change the other person's
right.
It's not just, seeking agreement,
right?
But it's trying to change their perspective rather than working hard to stay in the conversation, learn, and share our views in ways that they could be heard.
Yes.
So inspiring instead of attempting to change.
Yes.
Right? Because militant activism is, takes this approach. We want to change
right.
the other person's perspective, and we choose militancy to do it. So right. Share with me your perspective on this, and what can we tell our listeners who might have completely ignored certain hot topics of fear of things blowing up at a Thanksgiving dinner or at a holiday party?
Well, I agree with everything you just shared. I think to try to be curious, to try not to enter it trying to convince the other person that you're right and they're wrong, that's not going to go well. But to be open and to try to hear and be curious. Like, for example, if you take the topic of abortion, which is, definitely has been a hot button topic, although, the statistics on the American public opinion is that 70% of Americans believe that women should be able to decide when and how to become a mother, because the burdens of motherhood are huge. But if you take the topic of abortion and you really listen to somebody who identifies themselves as pro-life, that's a label, but underneath the label is a belief that they want to see all human life, and they want to see, all potential life, the potential life of a fetus that might become a baby, might not all fetuses become babies, but the potential of human life is so important to them that they want to see that always have a chance at life. You can relate to that. I can relate to that. I can believe that. I agree with that. That I wish that were the case. And just like you and I were talking earlier, where you had needs and I have needs and they're not the same. And I also believe that women, because motherhood, as I know personally, is a huge amount of work. It's an enormous amount of work, and it's a massive financial burden. Not everyone can take on the tremendous job of parenting and bringing a child into the world. There's still a high risk of mortality. There's a higher risk of, that means death, a higher risk of mortality for women of color giving birth. So it's not like, oh, just have the baby. You might not make it. So It's not a small consequence. It's not a small risk. So I have compassion for women to struggle with when and how and whether to be a mother, when, how, and whether to grow a human being in their own body, give over their life to that effort, and produce a child, hopefully safely, when, how, and whether. And some may choose, that's not for me. And some may say, I'm too young. And some may say, I'm too old. I have 4 children. I can't have a 5th. A lot of, on that topic, a lot of abortions, we assume that they're teenagers. And by the way, there's a boy involved in that, not just a girl, but we hold the girls responsible and blame the girls and criminalize the girls. But there's a boy behind every pregnancy. But it's not generally teenagers, it's generally adults, and they often have 1 or 2 children already. And they're like, oh God, I can't do this right now. Like, I'll lose my job and I can't afford it, or I can barely afford daycare right now. I cannot have a 3rd child. I can't do it. And I really do believe that we have to value the existing human being who's already here, living, trying to do their best, rather than saying that their life is not as important as the potential fetus that might be a child, might not. I say that as somebody who lost 4 pregnancies. They don't all work out.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing you say, again, and you said it earlier differently, is that every dialogue doesn't have to lead to one solution, to one answer, to both agreeing.
Right.
There's a multitude of possibilities, a multitude of different perspectives might coexist
and
in a given dialogue and can survive that dialogue.
And can I have empathy for your perspective? Can I see what does make sense? So that's from Imago Mirroring Method. What does make sense to me about what you're saying? The part that makes sense to me is, and I have empathy. I can have empathy for how you must feel about that. So can we have empathy and validate what makes sense to another person?
I mean, and maybe what we need to be doing in these situations is to seek to understand the other perspective.
Yes.
And be able to articulate it without necessarily embracing it if we choose not to embrace it. But to be able to articulate it, because that alone might allow us to see that there could be other nuances to a solution or multiple solutions. I know.
I'd like to say something, just like, and so this lovely colleague of mine, Rosa Khorshidi, who's a Muslim Iranian therapist with whom I do and have done the Israel-Palestine dialogues. We just did one 2 weeks ago on May 2nd. She always says, listen to understand, listen to understand. Can we listen to understand? Mm-hmm. So just when you said it, and I heard that. So I wanted to.
Yes. I mean, I was gonna just, mention to you something you already know, I guess, is the work of Adam Grant.
I like his stuff.
An organizational psychologist at Wharton who actually addresses in one of his books, Think Again, the issue of difficult dialogue. And he basically urges us not to be preachers when we enter dialogue by trying to, tell the others what they need to hear, not prosecute the other, by basically judging them.
Yeah.
And not to be a politician with the other,
right?
By just taking a different approach and different message, but rather is inviting us to collect data and to embrace our hypotheses loosely, right?
Yes.
Like the way scientists do. And I think that's a very nice way.
Yes.
It's a nice taxonomy that I've been using to think about these situations. So let me ask you
yes.
And let me invite you to imagine a little bit as we come to the end of this very engaging dialogue, Jen. If we were to fast forward 10 years, right? And if your work has evolved and many people like you and organizations are doing similar important work, start to bear fruit, what would a world look like where difficult conversations no longer break us, but build bridges among us?
That would be amazing.
Could you think of some characteristics of that world?
Sure. So where difficult dialogues no longer break us, but engage us, and we don't have to run away from them. We don't have to shut it down. We don't have to avoid it. We don't have to try to win. But where we can just be more, I think we're more at ease with each other. We're less instantaneously threatened by each other. If you have a different view than I have, we're more peaceful about it. We have more, we can hold more complexity in our mind, like we talked about, that people can be both this and that, that we can hold that another human being might interpret the same data differently and might reach a different conclusion from the same data, and they're not wrong or bad, but we could have more openness to that. And so what would that be like? So my particular interest also is in trying to do more of this work, grounded resilience work, with the social justice field, with nonprofit organizing and organizers and people who are doing mission-driven work that I care about. And if they had more of these skills, and they had more resilience, and they had more compassion, more self-empathy, more empathy for others, more wisdom, I think it'd be amazing. Organizations would function more strongly. Their campaigns would be more successful, more at ease, more, we would all be operating from, that model you and I know, internal family systems, more from self-energy. Would be those qualities that Jim Schwartz talks about. We would be more calm, more courageous, more creative, more content, right? All of those, more compassionate, just naturally.
Yes. More
and
present,
more at ease, more present.
Yeah. We'll have greater perseverance, perhaps. Yes.
More perseverance.
Listen, hearing you say that gives me a lot of hope, Jen, knowing that you're doing this work, and I know many people are engaged in that space, which I believe is what's keeping the world afloat. It's not our governments, unfortunately. It's the people, the organizations that really are reminding us every day that we're not facing this moment alone. And I thank you, Jen, for reminding us that every aspect of us, every fear, every reaction deserves compassion.
Yes.
And none of those aspects should lead the conversation alone. We should dig deep into that wisdom that you referred to. When we pause, when we listen, when we mirror back the humanity in someone else, we become bridge builders in a world where chasms between us appear to be widening and deepening. So today you are urging us to take a deep breath and take a moment before reacting, to be more curious, to sense the other person's need or ask for it, and to be sensitive to it, to hold a reasonably open mind, and maybe even to ask, am I getting you? Right?
Yes.
To mirror your statements and your beliefs. Because sometimes repairing a broken dialogue doesn't begin with fixing, and probably never ends with fixing. It begins with truly seeing and actively listening to the other, and that might be good enough. So I'd like to give you the last word, Jen. I would thank you so much for this engagement. In a word or two, what gives you hope and resilience at this moment?
Well, I love what you just said. I love all of what you just shared. I love your beautiful mind. What gives me hope? So I think what gives me hope is that there are so many good human beings in the world trying to make the world a better place. And they are organizers, they are poets, they are therapists, they are healers. And I think all of it matters. And even our own little work that we're doing in grounded resilience and the workshops for federal workers, we reached a tiny fraction of people. We have, our impact numerically is small, maybe 1,000, tiny number. However, I do think, like the wings of a butterfly can affect weather currents across the globe. I think all those efforts make a difference. And I have many friends who are healers, and will not, from their own choice, step into the world of politics or step into any of the work that I do, but they are healers. And I think that helps and it matters. And they are meditators who connect to a higher source and are wishing peace on every living being. I think that matters. I think that helps. And I have friends who are organizers and maybe they drink too much coffee and stay up too late and work hard, but they are making a difference too. So I think all of those different human beings are trying to make the world a better place, and we have to hold on to that. We are in a terrible, painful time. Even as I'm saying all those examples, I'm thinking about some of the remarkable Palestinian human beings, a man who was a poet, a man who was a writer, remarkable human beings whose lives were taken by horrible bombing violence. So there's a lot of loss. We're at a terrible time, a lot of war right now, and a lot of authoritarian, judging people, condemning people, cracking down on human beings, violently harming human beings. None of that is good. But I think there are always people trying to make the world a better place. And I will end, if I could, just by mentioning just one person who is dying right now, who is an older, wonderful, gentle man, Peter Romer, and he's dying right now. And I sent a lovely note to somebody for him today. He was a psychiatrist, and he worked in the prison system with inmates. And I asked him about it once. Do you know why that choice? Because he's so brilliant and compassionate and wise. And he was clear, because you go where you're needed. And they need, the need is big. And so he spent his life helping inmates, to heal their own trauma, to feel better about themselves, to heal what they had done in the world, whatever it is. So I wanted to mention him. There are many good human beings making the world a better place, and we are lucky to know them.
Well, we wish him well. You are one of those people working hard to make the world a better place. I thank you for it. I thank you for everything you do. I thank you for your insights.
Thank you
for engaging with us. Jen Wofford, thank you.
I'm very grateful to you. I'm very grateful for your wisdom, very grateful for the way you think about things and put them together into words. I really do. I admire your mind and how much you're taking on and trying to envision what could happen when we try to step into the arena, as you say it. So I really appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. Many blessings.
Thanks for listening. Facing the Moment is an independent production of the Foundation for Self-Leadership, a nonprofit committed to bringing emotional, relational, and societal healing and well-being to a world in need. Learn more at foundationifs.org. You can download this and all other episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Until the next episode, may we all keep facing the moment with grit and grace.